favorite film is awful.
Hello, welcome to Your Favourite Film is Awful, the show where we take your favourite films and defend them against negative reviews. As always, I'm Luke, and with me is Charlie and special guest Matt. How are you both doing?
Magic.
I'm great. I'm science.
Magic.
Science.
Excellent.
Yo.
Science.
And together we come together to form Science and Magic, Science Bros.
Chemistry.
Yeah, chemistry, biology.
Oh god. bit
dear.
Brent. We all went a bit Brent there.
Matt,
But
we
it's
can
alright,
all
we
see
all
you. Stop it.
It was pure Brentian theatre.
Yeah. You twit.
Brilliant.
So Matt, are you promoting Full Fat YouTube or Full Fat Podcast today? Which one are you doing?
I'm here to promote Nerdwriter 1. I decided I'd mix it up, you know. His videos are better than mine anyway.
You said it.
He said it. He said it.
Beautiful.
I am, of course, Matt Whittle of Full Fat Videos and Full Fat Podcast, which I do with my special co-host, Mr. Charlie Lee, who is stuck in between the middle of us on a Zoom call. Joy to him.
You got 5 for me, lads.
Well, Mr. Charlie Lee, we have been watching Attack of the Clones since the nursery days, so
It's true.
I win on this one. I win on Attack of the Clones.
I mean,
saddest
you went on
claim to
friendship,
fame ever.
Business party. Business before pleasure, they say.
The little.
I made a good point. So, how have you both been? What have you been watching this week?
I've been good, man. I've been watching a few things. Nothing too.
This podcast is gonna be a ramble.
Sorry,
joke, isn't it?
this is just too riveting. This is just.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exciting stuff, of course.
That's right, look, we'll get all the laughs out now, and
Get
then
them
we'll
all
get
out,
the
yeah.
cutting analysis
Yes,
on
of the
Padme
serious
and
drama
romance.
that is Attack of the Clones.
Oh god.
Werner Herzog's Attack of the Clones.
George Lucas's Fitzcarraldo. Brilliant.
Are you going to cut out all the laughter, or are you going to keep it in? I like to keep it in.
Oh,
I'll
this,
keep-
this is all Charlie's work now. So it's all, Charlie's not going to edit out all of this laughter. What do you take him for?
Sorry, my favourite part about this is that you're looking off screen and that you can look at the camera.
I'm going to do it when I want to, like, talk to the audience.
Yeah,
you know, I
okay,
wanna
yeah,
communicate,
yeah.
you know, like,
It's a bit of a talking
God, who
heads.
wrote me into this, eh?
Oh, fantastic.
It's just a nice dynamic angle, isn't it? It's a nice, you know, when I think dynamic, I think Matt Whittle.
All right, well, let's stop before he goes to David Brent. Anyway, so Matt, what have you been up to? Let's talk about what you've been up to first before we go on to what me and Luke have been
Well,
up to.
good sir. As you know, because we live together, I
Yeah.
don't know why you're even asking me.
I know.
For the people at home.
For the people at home, who care about you sitting around in your pants and what you're up to.
Excuse me, I do not sit around in my pants. I don't have to listen to these wild allegations.
Sorry, I mean really tight short shorts.
He noticed.
I couldn't miss those cheeks anywhere, baby. All right, before it gets weird, let's talk about what we're doing.
Speaking of cheeks, I've been following Django Fett's bum around because I've been playing a third-person actioner starring Django Fett called Star Wars Bounty Hunter from the 2002 days, from the Attack of the Clone era. It's kind of a tie-in video game to this movie, so it's been a good little bit of homework before we've come to do this, actually. And it sort of follows how Django Fett became the clone template.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of, yeah, it's like you're on like the ultimate bounty hunt of your life against these other bounty hunters to capture this leader of this like drug cartel who used to be a Jedi and Count Dooku's Padawan. And now Palpatine, it's actually really awesome. Palpatine is like to Dooku, oh, you need to find me a clone template and you need to get rid of this Kamari Vosa because her and the Band Ogora are going to just like rip through the galaxy, and it's going to destroy like, my like master plan. And this is like years before Order 66 and all that stuff. So it's like you're seeing the seeds of how it's happened. And then you get Jango Fett being an absolute beast. He's got some really well written lines. And there's lots of great action beats, and you go to all different kinds of planets. You go to Coruscant, Tatooine. It's all rendered in like murky PS2 graphics, of course, and the camera's off-putting, and it's all like like the kind of early noughties, like you lock on to a target rather than it being like a dynamic camera. It's all that kind of stuff, but it is a lot of fun, and I've been having a little blast playing it. I've actually been laughing to myself whilst I've been playing it.
I've been hearing. I've been quite enjoying, to be fair, walking in and seeing some of it. I mean, it's a game I never got to play, and I never knew, like, until Matt said the other day that it kind of ties in that little part of Attack of the Clones that is sort of mentioned but not discussed in detail. So Matt's probably going to have some little nuggets of, I guess, canon, because it hasn't been debunked, has it, as not canon?
No, so I touched a little bit on this because, well, the reason I've been playing it is for a new video on Full Fat Videos, and they said that all of that kind of era, Disney said, was erased, didn't they? And they sort of just kept, I think it was like the main movies and Clone Wars and a couple of other things. So technically, it has been erased from canon, but because it hasn't been contradicted yet, I can still sort of view it as canon, and I hope you all view it as canon as well. Because it is canon. Yes. I'm going to exhaust the full break.
Yeah.
The 20-minute mark.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I've been very much enjoying it. I'm kind of sad I didn't get to play it when I was younger, if I'm honest with you. But now I've got to see Matt play it twice because, ladies and gentlemen, he hasn't just recorded, the footage that you're about to watch in his new video essay that's coming out. He also decided to replay the whole game, record it all, and then replay it again, just for fun. Which was, that's how much he loves it. And to be fair, it does look really fun.
And both times he made sure the controller was far away from you.
Yeah.
No, you see, it's because he was working in his day-to-day, whereas I have somehow, like the slob I am, found a way to make video games my work. So I just sat there whilst he was on his laptop and I was playing video games, trying to pretend like I was working hard.
You call yourself a slob, but we're all envious of you. Like, that's the
Not me. No. I love doing
I like to work hard.
Yeah.
He was literally working hard whilst I was playing hard.
Brilliant.
Jeez.
But yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, Luke.
And it ties in neatly to Attack of the Clones.
It does, actually.
It does tie in neatly.
Luke, mate?
I watched Staged, the David Tennant and Michael Sheen thing that's on the BBC. It's very good. It's all like this. It's all through like Zoom chat and stuff. And
cool.
The first season was them rehearsing for a play for after lockdown, and this second season is about the US. Like, it addresses that the first season was a show, and the second season is the show getting a US remake, but without them.
That sounds like a really interesting way to take it.
Yeah.
It's so good. You guys, like, they're 15-minute episodes. There's like 16 total episodes, I think. Definitely worth a watch if you've between spouts of playing your Bounty Hunter game.
Spouts of playing Bounty Hunter. My life is Bounty Hunter.
Beautiful. But yeah, so you've already mentioned it a few times, but Attack of the Clones is the film that we're doing today. Which one of you want to tell us what Attack of the Clones is about? Extra challenge, don't talk about the other 5 films.
Shall we do it by, like, me and Charlie maybe, like, finishing each other's sentences?
Oh, I can imagine nothing better.
Right, we'll give it a go.
Okay, well, I'll start. Attack of the Clones is really more of a concept, really.
Oh, fuck you. Fuck you.
Charlie, you got to finish that sentence.
Sorry, that was a dramatic pause. That was a comma, and now I'm going to continue on.
It's a concept.
And it...
Yeah, go.
It tells the story... I'll do a serious one now. It tells the story of a young man who has some deep-seated anger and mummy issues, who is assigned to protect a senator who is in danger, tied up in a bit of a kind of political backdrop going on. I've already spoken for too much. I'm going to now let Charlie finish the sentence.
A very long sentence.
So far we've got an angry young boy.
You got me going.
We've got an angry young boy with some mummy issues and anger issues. Apparently, that's what we've got so far. Yeah, it's about essentially, him falling in love behind the Jedi's back with this senator, which they obviously Jedi's are not allowed to love, are they? But meanwhile, while this is going on, Obi-Wan is looking into a assassin who leads him to essentially find that there is a clone army built for the Jedi, essentially. But it's a bit mysterious. We don't quite know. Yeah, what's happened really? Yeah,
Was that the segue?
That's the segue. Yeah.
That's the
Just to join on.
Is
that.
this all one long sentence?
Yes.
I feel
Yeah,
like I've
it's one long
felt a
sentence,
couple of
yeah.
commas, but no full stops yet.
No, we don't
Afterwards, we're going to get you to say the whole thing with no stops.
do that.
And
Hope
then
you write it down.
Jesus.
But yeah, like I think the whole what my learned friend here was trying to tell you is that essentially war is inevitable. War with the separatists who have been breaking away from the Republic. The Jedi are going to be in the middle of it. All of Palpatine's pieces are kind of placed on the board so that the Clone Wars can indeed begin. That is kind of the point of this movie.
I think we got that.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Smashed
Yeah.
It was actually really
Wow.
hard not to mention the other movies.
it. Yes.
I know, right?
Yeah,
It was
but
hard.
I think it does help you strip it down to like what is it actually about. When we
Yes,
take away like the fact that it's an interquel and it's all sandwiched between all this other shit, what is this actually meant to be telling?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like the majority
it's,
of the plot is like obviously Obi-Wan and Anakin trying to figure out who this assassin is and what that whole situation is. That seems to be like the running through thread, isn't it?
I'd
quite
go
like
as
the
far
way
as
it's
say that it's a
structured.
love story with the backdrop of finding an assassination.
Or maybe it's an assassination with some love thrown in.
Whoa.
Oh.
And some hate and some sand.
Yeah. Some sand.
Right, let's do what we do here and do the first review. So this is from Harvard. It's a half star. Christopher Lee riding his senior citizen scooter to run away from the Jedi is the only good thing in this movie.
Well,
Oh, do you want me to comment on that already? Is that the whole review?
That's the whole review.
That's the whole review.
That was the half star review from Harvard.
You know what makes this even funnier to me is that for those of you listening at home, before the podcast started, I made Luke send me typed up versions of all the reviews just in case like I got lost in the middle of the review. I made him do that and he did it for nothing.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre that out of all the awesome things that happen, like for example, Jango Fett fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Blade Runner-esque chase at the start of the movie, the whole thing in the pit fight arena with the three different creatures facing Padme, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, and the Count Dooku duel itself with not only Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, but also I know that's all of them. with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and then Master Yoda. I find it hard to imagine how him on his OAP scooter is the best part of it. And by the way, don't disrespect Christopher Lee. He's an absolute beast.
Yes.
Or he was an absolute beast.
I was about to get the
Yeah,
right
God rest
needle. I was about to get the right there to get back when they first started dissing Christopher Lee, but then they sort of said, he's the best thing about it, and I kind of forgive them.
But they kind of wreck him at the same time, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
It is his senior citizen scooter to run away from the
think-
Jedi.
I think they thought that was really, really funny, and in fact based the whole review around that.
They did, and it
Yeah.
didn't get many
I
laughs out
mean,
of us, did it?
to the point where it was the only...
Yeah, like he had a few more things. He was like Marking Peep show at the funeral, and he's just like, I'll just do the brutal edit. I'll just cut all this stuff down.
Just cut all the fat away. You only need the one joke.
Yeah, this bit's gold. I'll go with this. Send review. Send tweets.
Mwah, perfect.
To answer it more seriously and eloquently, I think there's a lot this movie has to offer. I think as a whole package, it doesn't quite come together. I think there's a lot of things that it does that Revenge of the Sith would then tighten and make more fun, like Anakin and Obi-Wan's banter,
Yeah.
particularly at the start when they're together. it's really not working, really not flowing in Attack of the Clones.
What you mean that beautiful lift scene where Obi-Wan just plucks this random story out of the non-existent backstory?
We fell
and
into
it's
that
like,
nest of
I
dumb
fell into
nuts."
that. I think you fell into that.
Yeah, it doesn't work, does it? Whereas like the banter in Revenge of the Sith is so much stronger. It's like, like no loose wire jokes. I didn't say anything. He's trying. I didn't say anything. Like that bit's like just always gets a chuckle out of me.
Yeah, it's great.
But having said that, I do think there's a well-structured plot in there, if not hampered by some really twee wooden dialogue. And I do think the ground it covers and the way in which it sets up the Clone Wars, and you see that Palpatine's working both sides, and you see how kind of the Jedi are caught up in the middle of it, and also the Anakin Padme love story. I do think it's on paper quite an interesting thing. So all that stuff, I do think, it has something to offer. But if we're just going to get down to the filth of the matter, if you're going to bring up Count Dooku in the same sentence as saying that this little part of it is the only good thing about the movie, I've got news for you, because Count Dooku is awesome, start to finish. Even though he comes into the movie very late, Christopher Lee, he has the gravitas and the presence to more than rival the previous baddie Darth Maul. And I think he's just got like such a great look. I love that he's an ex-Jedi, also ties into Anakin Skywalker eventually leaving the Jedi. And I like that he's more of a gentleman Sith. He's not like your typical like like I'm like amped up on dark side energy. He's more like, oh no, I want to actually better the galaxy. I think maybe he thinks Palpatine has better intentions than what he does.
He's like the flip side of Obi-Wan, I feel like, Count Dooku, in terms of his like
Interesting
presence. Like he's very like that whole civilized sort of form of fighting and addressing and sort of carrying yourself.
And I like that you've made that comparison, because obviously it's Count Dooku trains Qui-Gon, who trains Obi-Wan. And in this movie, Count Dooku actually says to Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon would have joined me. Because as we know, he was kind of a bit of an unorthodox Jedi, and he had a lot of points that the Council didn't agree with, and obviously he wanted Anakin to be trained. So I do kind of like the idea that Dooku sees like Obi-Wan as kind of like, a bit of a mirror image of him, and maybe one day he'll come to see things how he's seen them, how he believes Qui-Gon would have seen them, and maybe he'll come and join him.
Definitely. And I think what you said as well about that, interesting about how he thinks maybe that Palpatine has the better way of dealing with things, because I think that kind of mirrors the conversation that Anakin has with Padme, when he's sort of saying, she's like, oh, that's a dictatorship. He's like, maybe someone should make them think that way. And it's obviously, that's the sort of same sort of belief that maybe Count Dooku has. Do you know what I mean? That these people need to be...
Because I think he's so completely, honestly anti-Republic. I don't think that's like a lie. And he did genuinely break away from the Jedi because he wanted to find something better. And I think he does genuinely believe that Palpatine and the Separatists is the way to do that. Obviously, he knows that it's ultimately a great big double cross. He's in on Palpatine's plan. And he knows that obviously they created the clones. But I do think long term, what he sees is the destruction of the Jedi, a reinstatement of a stronger Republic under Palpatine's rule. I think he genuinely believes that what he's doing is beyond like the Jedi's view of the Sith, which is like, self-centered and lusting for power.
Definitely. Yeah, and I 100% agree with what you said earlier about the movie as a whole having some good plotting but not quite the execution, because I do think like on paper Attack of the Clones, in my opinion, should be like nearly like the best of the three almost, maybe the exception of Revenge of the Sith because it's got all the stuff in, but like if you look at it on paper, I feel like this movie, it's got all the potential to be like amazing. I mean, not it's and like you said, I think it's really let down by some of the execution of some of the dialogue and some of like obviously some of the CGI of the time and stuff like that. But other than that, if you look at like the actual plotting of it, I think
agree.
from the start,
I agree.
Yeah,
because I think if you actually break it down and go, oh well, this is about how, as George Lucas says, there's no, dictatorships are voted in. There's no coup. Like it naturally happens. And to see like so many years before Order 66 and before the actual, creation of the Empire, Palpatine pulling the strings and, sort of creating the clone army in the shadows, and the way Jango Fett is all tied to that, and the way he's trying to assassinate Amidala. So that obviously it all builds up to, oh, well, Obi-Wan's got to go over here, Anakin's got to go over here. They've got to get split up. We've got Obi-Wan going on this detective story to find Jango Fett and find the clones, and we've got Anakin falling in love with Padme against his better judgment and, you know, being tested as a Jedi. And also, I think a thing that doesn't get brought up enough is we get a really good thread with his mum.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's, honestly, I think that's the best scene in the movie, when he goes to find his mum. Duel of the Fates is playing, because it's tying into, you know, the Duel of the Fates playing when Qui-Gon was killed. It's like, this is another big moment in Anakin's life that will decide who he's going to become. And
Well,
obviously he
in the
chooses-
galaxy, really.
100%,
Like, this is the
100%.
moment where everything goes. That's why it's so good to play that bit, because it's like, this is the moment where this is it. This is the turning point. This is the moment where he went off the rail when he first see that glimpse of Darth Vader, isn't it? So
And even
Yeah,
watching
because-
it again. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say it depends on how he reacts to that situation. Because if he'd had, like hypothetically, if Qui-Gon had been Anakin's master, then he may have dealt with Shia's death better and would have continued
Yes.
the Jedi path. But because he's had this conflicting brotherly sibling rivalry relationship with Obi-Wan, that's why he's like, nah, the Jedi aren't doing it for me. Fuck everything,
Yeah,
and starts going dark.
I actually think the mum stuff, you can really perfectly surmise what's wrong with this movie, right? Is like him being tested with attachments that are forbidden, with like his love for Padme, his love for his mum, him going to Tatooine to find her. Not only Padme endorsing that, but getting to see him being told, your mum's probably dead. And we hang on her face in a close-up and we see that she's like, you know, she feels for him so intensely, and they already do have a chemistry. And then to see him go through this is really potent, and all that stuff's great. Him going to find the mum, you know, him, you know, giving into his darker nature and killing Tusken Raiders, admitting it to Padme. That's all great, right? But then you go to the start of the movie, and there's a bit of dialogue where he goes, "I've been having lots of bad dreams about my mum, Obi-Wan, but I'd much rather dream about Padme. She's intoxicating." And you just sat there like, that was so weird. And like, he wouldn't speak like that. That's not how human beings speak. And they wouldn't just go from, yeah, my mum, to Padme. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, that brings the movie down for me. When you've got like all of this really well structured, really well thought out plotting. It's the actual nitty gritty of the scenes and the dialogue and the back and forth and the way it's constructed that sometimes just falls so flat.
Yeah.
yes, I 100% agree.
So flat that, in fact, Count Dooku on his little mobility scooter is the best bit of the film. Just to loop it all back around.
I disagree, Gary. I disagree.
Shall we have a review from Honest Cinema Guy? He's an honest cinema guy.
Well,
Honest
let's
Cinema
see.
Guy.
When
It's
you
a half
paused,
star
I thought there was
review.
going to be a number. Like
Nope.
Honest Cinema Guy 3329.
He is the Honest Cinema Guy. I'm not a Star Wars fan as such. I'm a fan of movies. Star Wars was good. The following two movies were okay. The Phantom Menace wasn't good. Attack of the Clones is utter garbage. It is so infuriatingly awful in places that it tarnishes any good parts. I can't really recall much good. Some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard, the least romantic romance I've ever seen, and it's creepy too, seeing as in the last movie, Padme was a motherly figure to Anakin. Plus the usual focus on politics, an atrocious movie in every way. Badly written, stupid nonsense.
I think this review is very honest, which is fair enough. He is an honest cinema guy. But I think it's very misguided. I think he's been tainted by the ways of the Sith, and he has allowed this Dark Lord to twist his mind until now. Until now, he has become the very thing he swore to destroy. I'm not a
Sith
Star Wars
Lord?
fan. I'm not a Star Wars fan as such. I'm a fan of movies. Like, the two things aren't mutually exclusive. That's really strange. And I think to be a fan of movies, you should at least have some appreciation for the original Star Wars trilogy and what they did.
Well, he does. He thinks that the first one was good, and the other two were like.
Yeah, but
at
he's being
minimum,
so coy about it, isn't he?
yeah. At minimum,
I mean?
the original trilogy is okay, if not good, and the rest is bad.
I mean, look, he's entitled to his opinion. I think Attack of the Clones is utter garbage, is unfair, and I think he goes on to explain why I disagree with him, in fact, because of what we just said. So, obviously, he goes into... he doesn't like the romance. I think the romance is well drawn in the sense I like that they knew each other when they were younger. He's not had any other attachment to anyone else, so of course he's had this like crush that has developed for so many years, and you know he's never really had a lot in his life anyway, and for him to suddenly meet her again and get, you know, forced to protect her and them to be placed in this really tense situation, it's kind of sexy, I guess. It's an interesting way to go with it, and I do buy that these two do want to get together. I just think there's obviously a few lines that are very awkward. Obviously, there's the sand line, which has been parodied to death. But the one that always cringed me out, even as a kid, was when
Yes,
you know,
I know
after
what you're
they've
talking
kissed. I think you do know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
After they've kissed, it's cringing me out even thinking to say it. But he says something like, "I'm haunted by the kiss you should never have given me,
Yes,
and
yeah,
I'm praying and hoping
Mwah.
that kiss will not become a scar." And like he's saying it to her, and she's like, like it's just like cringe, premium cringe.
It's so cringe.
I do kind of
yes.
understand though from the same perspective, like that line is terrible, but I can also understand from like Anakin's point of view of like, you know, he's a Jedi, he's not supposed to have any relationships, and you know he's fancied this girl when he was younger and she's kissed him, and you know is played on his mind. I can see that would play on his mind forever if he was a young boy, like being kissed by. Do you know what I mean? I do understand that as much as that line is cringe.
I mean, you can add like a pinch of salt with it all as well, because you got to remember, with this whole attachment thing that they were really pushing in the original movies, he's not had a relationship, so he has never learnt to flirt.
No, look. I think all of that stuff is really valid, and I think it's there in the movie somewhat, and then I think some of the dialogue either over eggs it and makes it really bluntly obvious when it didn't need to be, or it goes off on this weird kind of metaphorical tangents. You know, like him talking about sand and talking about the kiss becoming a scar. It's like you don't need all of that. It's not Shakespeare, and I actually think when George Lucas reins himself in and he makes things more about telling the story in the cut and telling it through images, like there's a really nice moment later on where where Anakin meets Watto with Padme, and he hasn't told him that he's Anakin, and obviously they haven't seen each other in like 10 plus years, and he just takes the thing that Watto's trying to fix, the droid, and he starts fixing it, and as he's fixing it he goes, "I'm looking for Shmi Skywalker, right?" And Watto's like, "Annie?" Like, but he's not sure. And then Anakin puts the droid back down. Watto looks at the droid, sees that it's been fixed perfectly, and he's like, "It is Annie!"
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because he knew that he was this talented mechanic. He's always been gifted. He's seen that he's fixed this thing, and that's all you need to know. You've seen it in the shot. From, not to mention, a pretty poorly realised CGI character. Not in terms of the effects, but in terms of the overall package. As a character, Watto, not great. But
Annie!
Annie!
yeah, it's a poorly realised Jewish stereotype, isn't it, really? But to see him have that moment of humanity and go, "Oh, it is Annie," like, "Oh, I've put it all together," like, that's a really satisfying moment, and I just wish that kind of filmmaking was in the entire movie. I wish it was more visual, and I wish, you know, the dialogue could, well, speak for itself a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's little moments like, you know, when Anakin's standing looking out by like the window, where, you know, like looking out at the where he's like looking after Padme. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you mean.
That really
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
shot
yeah.
of him standing there. Like,
Before they go to Tatooine.
yeah, like that
Yeah.
to me says everything. He doesn't need to say to anyone, "Oh, it's because I've been having dreams about my mother, blah blah blah." We've seen that. All he has to do is show that shot, and then afterwards he goes, "I've got to go somewhere. I'm sorry, I've got to leave you, but I've got to go." Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's all you need as an audience, as anyone needs. It tells you enough. I just think that is the problem. I think sometimes this film comes across like it could have done with like another draft almost. Like it's there. It's just the dialogue is just really clunky, and like it's so on the nose sometimes. Like, I mean, as it's been parodied to death for a reason. And I think that a lot of people think about this movie, they think about that, and they don't think about some of the other good stuff that happens in it. And I think because obviously it's so terrible, some of the dialogue, and like, you know, it is some of the worst dialogue. I do understand that guy saying that, but
he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
But I think that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of merit to this movie, and that there isn't something that could have been. And I think particularly, maybe we're a bit forgiving because I think Star Wars fans, obviously the Star Wars fans that have grown up now, you know, we've grown up with the perspective of, yeah, we know this bit's clunky, but like where the story is going, I was like, oh, this is a good this is a good idea from George Lucas. I like this. There is a movie out, there is a trilogy out there that is perfection that we just didn't quite get. But that being said, I can't deny and say that there is some really fun moments. Yeah, this is probably one of the worst Star Wars films. But if I'm honest, I think that I would much rather watch this than something like Rogue One, and I think that comes down to the characters for me, and the fact that, like you said, even though it's basically just a love story and a mystery going through, you get so much with that. There's so much that you find out about the world, about these characters, even though that's just the plot. Whereas, like, for Rogue One, which you could almost argue is even more in depth in that sense, doesn't delve into those things as much.
I see what you mean. I think for me,
sense.
it's that this is an essential Star Wars story tying into the original trilogy that details both why Anakin is a caring person who is a good Jedi, but whilst he's also someone who seeks out attachments and, you know, allows himself to give in to hatred and anger, you know, via the Tusken Raider scene, and that stuff's all really interesting. Versus for me with Rogue One, it's just here's this little sentence in the title call of A New Hope, and here's a whole movie of that. How did they get the Death Star plans? And just for me personally, even though this film I think stumbles and is a lot hokier and a lot more wooden at times, and some of you know the technical stuff hasn't aged quite that well, I still think it tells an essential Star Wars story that I want to see the fall of Darth Vader. I don't so much really care about who stole the Death Star plans, but that's just me. A lot of people like that movie. So,
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think saying Attack of the Clones is better than Rogue One is, you know, seen as a bit of a hot take, but I think it's just for those reasons, really. And I think sometimes it just comes down to, like, what do you enjoy watching more? And I watched this before we came to do the podcast, and I had a lot of fun with a lot of the set pieces. I think there's actually some really good action in it, like when Jango is chasing Obi-Wan through the asteroid fields, and you've got the seismic charges. The sound design on that is fantastic. The whole, as I said earlier, the pit arena scene with the three different creatures, again, really well designed, really great tension. And also, Padme as a character against two Jedi, she climbs up to the top of the pillar, starts, you know, taking on the cat creature, the Nexu, I think it's called, by herself. You know, like, you get to see through the action what a competent character she is. She stands her own in that pit arena against, like, literally amongst an army of Jedi and battle droids. Yeah. And that whole sequence is great. And then it literally, the clones come down and obliterate all the droids. That bit is awesome. And also, you know, on your point about Rogue One being an inferior movie, I said this before in a previous video, so I'm just regurgitating my old stuff here. But I still think it's an appropriate point for this podcast. Attack of the Clones does the same moment in Rogue One way better. And it's the moment where the cavalry comes in, all seems lost, the Jedi are boxed in on Geonosis, Count Dooku's like, you can either get, you know, you can either be made hostages or you will die, and Mace Windu's like, well, we're not going to be hostages to be bartered, Dooku. You will die then. Everything seems lost. They seem screwed. At the last second, the last possible second, the tension is at an all-time high. We've stretched the rubber band, as Quentin Tarantino would say. The
You hear
gunship's
Yoda say, "On your left."
Brilliant.
Yes, but again, that moment in Avengers Endgame, fantastic moment, because like Attack of the Clones, Captain America is down to his last legs, like the Jedi are, like they've been defeated. Thanos' whole army stands, you know, opposite him. What is he going to do? We get both of those moments really well realised in those movies. Whereas in Attack of the Clones, in Rogue One, you just know that the cavalry's coming. There's a scene where they cut to the fighters refueling and everything flying off, and then 20 minutes later they arrive when the team are struggling. But it's like, well, I knew they were coming, so there was no tension in that. And I just think it weirdly, the Rogue One battle at the end is always really praised as like a stunning bit of action, but I think it's not at all. I don't think there's much tension in it. I think it's a bit meandering. I don't think the geography's very well realised, and there's no moment for me where all seems lost. Yes, a load of characters die, but I feel like it gets to the point where it's almost parody of, like, the first one's died, the second one's died, now they're all going to die because obviously you don't see them in A New Hope. I don't think it's necessarily inherently tense just because we're seeing characters die. There needs to be something that is lost in the process. And for a bunch of characters that I've never met before the movie in the Star Wars world and haven't painted a very good picture of who their personalities are.
Still don't really know who they are by the end.
No, exactly. So how can I really care when all this stuff's happening?
Yep.
don't.
I would 100% agree with all that, and I think it's interesting as well that you brought up the Endgame moment with the Yoda sort of with all of them coming in, the clones and stuff. Because I read in the new issue of Empire, there was a little segment where Kevin Feige spoke about. They was talking about their top sort of cinema moments, and moments they particularly remember where the audience went crazy in the cinema or scared or whatever. And he directly referenced the scene where Yoda turns up in Attack of the Clones, and he said when that happened at the time, people lost their fucking minds in a similar way. And I think it's interesting because I think that you compared that scene with Captain America, because I think that was intentional of Kevin Feige. He wants to recreate those moments.
I suppose he's kind of been doing it his whole career, isn't he?
Exactly. And I think it's really interesting because, like, yes, this is a movie that, you know, a lot of people have panned and said is rubbish, but this is something that a producer like Kevin Feige has looked at and taken that and then made a career out of that moment almost. And I think that's, fascinating.
Yeah, it's exactly like you've both said. It's one of those that this film is not the best, but there's enough bits that are like diamonds in the rough, and it is like this bit's great, this bit's great, this bit's great. It's not in a great package, but there's enough to like pluck out of and get a lot of enjoyment out of.
It's like I've
especially
got my
with
burger, and I'm pulling out the tomatoes, and I'm putting the tomatoes over here, and like it's. You know, it's a takeaway burger. It's not like a restaurant-style burger. It's still pretty good. It's still a burger.
Yeah,
it could be better.
It'll fill you up.
You get your filth.
It's tasty. You get your filth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Very quick tangent, but I was thinking about it when I was watching it the other day. Of the three pit monsters, the pit aliens, which one would you want as a pet?
Ooh,
that's a great question.
That's a great question.
I think the cat you could tame. My girlfriend's been showing me a lot of videos on what the kids use these days, TikTok. And
yes,
she's
the
I thought it was
TikTok.
Tok-Tik.
Tok-Tik.
Just to show how out of touch you are, Charlie.
She was showing me some videos of like lions that are on like reserves and like nature reserves, and the trainers like have a relationship and a bond with them that's as if they're like house cats, and it's utterly terrifying to watch as an uninitiated lion person, to see like these big giant cats like cuddling them and all that. But you know, it really does go to show the affection that these creatures can have. And with that in mind, I'm thinking, even though the Nexu, the big cat creature that attacks Padme, is pretty fearsome, I think maybe in the same way as the lion trainers, maybe if they were on a reserve with me on my farm in Star Wars land, and right next to Galen Erso, he's on the plot next to me. I've got my pet Nexu.
Pet Nexu. With
That's
its
a good
weird
answer.
spider eyes and sharp teeth and rat tail.
Yeah, but it's cute, and like
It
you
is
haven't
cute.
seen it.
I do like it.
You haven't seen little Jimmy Nexu when he's with me, all right? He's a little cuddly creature. He sits on my lap and I pet him, and he waggles his tail. He's
Fuck
lovely.
you know, you got a big lap.
Oh, yeah. That's true. We don't know how big those things are.
Yeah, he's like...
Brilliant.
Comes out the womb the size of you.
Yep.
I'm not giving birth to him.
Charlie, what's your answer?
I think that's a good answer from Matt. I was initially thinking the Nexu one. I think that obviously the Rhino one is easily tamed, isn't it? Because they easily tame it. But I think just for the fact that
He ugly, though.
yeah, but this is what I'm saying. Just for the fact that the Star Wars universe is so terrifying, and you know, I need to get by. I need to travel. There's constantly things trying to kill me, eat me. I'm going for the big spider fucker. If I can have that as a pet and I can ride that motherfucker, no one's coming near me.
Yeah.
No one's coming near me. Imagine
yeah.
that with some sort of lightsaber. Yeah.
Mate, have you not seen Jurassic World? That sort of power can't be tamed.
I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. Before I asked the question, I already knew which one I wanted, and it's the big spider crab motherfucker. Because he's the only one that he gets stabbed by Obi-Wan, and he remembers that shit. So if you be nice to that spider, you might have a friend in the spider.
Good point.
So what you're saying is that you guys are going to be fighting over the spider whilst it decides which one of you it's going to eat first.
Yes.
Whilst
Yeah.
I'm sat over here with my cat going, it's okay, baby, we're all good. Just give
You
him a
say that.
cuddle."
but the cat's the only one that gets fucked over by one of the other animals. Because the rhino kills the cat.
But that rhino creature had
but-
Anakin Skywalker riding atop him, and they tapped into the Force with his Jedi power of animal friendship, which is a canon power.
It is a canon power.
Oh,
And he
fucking
amped him
hell.
up, and he managed to take out the Nexu. That's what happened.
The
Canon.
Force, the catch-all.
Canon.
Oh, the Force is such a beast. What's the... If we went through, the Jedi just aren't using the Force properly, are they? Like, everyone can do
do you mean?
telekinesis. Everyone can use telekinesis, but nobody uses it when it's, like, the perfect time.
They tap
The
into the
freaking-
Force in different ways, you know. Sometimes it's for strength, sometimes it's for guidance. You know, like when they've got their lightsaber out, you know, there's not as much time
This is
to use telekinetic powers, you know.
I don't
And,
know,
and a
if-
Jedi Master that could do both at the same time, like Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, would obviously show that he's one of the most powerful Jedi to ever exist, as in the season 2 Mandalorian finale.
I'm just saying, if there's time for you to jump out of a window to catch a robot, there's time for you to lift up your hand and just stop that robot from going anywhere.
But I imagine it's very difficult to block a load of blaster fire and tap into the Force to lift objects. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of, that was in 3D,
Concentrate.
wasn't it?
Yeah, hands
You
coming
have to
right for me.
concentrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's like it's one of those things you just sort of you take it as it comes. Like they have all these different powers, they tap into them as and when the story needs it. I try not to think about it too much because I think you'll ruin the fun.
Yeah. Do you guys think that that the reason why people see this as like the worst Star Wars movie or has some of the worst stuff or whatever, do you think it's because it has some of the worst stuff in like some of the ideas in Star Wars, like in terms of like isn't this, you know, like there's more mention of like the midichlorians, there's obviously people weren't happy with the fact that the stormtroopers were clones back then, like do you know what I mean, do you think like all of these big
yes.
ideas are the reasons why people don't like this movie and have not kind of...
I love that your question is, do you think people think this is the worst Star Wars film because it has some of the worst stuff in it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean it's a stupid question, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like in terms of
Yeah.
it, that those stuff overshadow a lot of the stuff that is really good, that has got a lot of merit.
I do think the whole thing with Django being the template for the clone army, I think is a really interesting one to pick out because obviously at the time people were really disappointed that we got young Boba Fett, and similarly to Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, Little Annie in Phantom Menace, they felt that seeing him as a child has ruined the majesty and ruined the mystique. But I think as someone that grew up with the generation where the prequels, you know, were being released as we were children, to me it was just, oh, that's Jango Fett, that's Boba Fett's dad. And obviously he inherits the armor in the later trilogy. That makes sense. Star Wars is about generations of families, so it kind of ties in nicely that Jango Fett is in the prequels. Also, you got to look at this from a perspective in terms of George and what he's trying to do for the fans that grew up on the original trilogy. What he basically tried to do is he knew that Boba Fett age-wise wouldn't work out in the timeline to be in the prequels, but he knew how much people liked Boba Fett from the original trilogy and obviously wanted to give you more Boba Fett. So his solution to giving you more Boba Fett, by the way, imagine this if it was Boba Fett, if he could get the timelines to work. What he gave you was Boba Fett being part of a detective story, ended up being the clone template, and also Obi-Wan goes on a hunt for him and he tries to chase him. They have like a space battle. Like, that sounds awesome.
Sounds
The only
amazing.
The only difference is that it was Jango Fett and not Boba Fett because you needed to get someone younger so that the timelines make sense, so you make it his father. That makes complete sense to me. And also, Tamira Morrison is the greatest thing that has ever happened to the Fett family in Star Wars. Casting him and having him in this movie and having him full voice and likeness in Star Wars Bounty Hunter, I think lent a lot to the Jango Fett character. And as we're seeing now with Mandalorian, he's lending a lot to the Boba Fett character as well. Like, these are essentially the same character. Obviously, they're clones. But what he's brought to Boba Fett, I think, sort of hangs on the idea that he has climbed out of the Sarlacc and he's a battered, bruised man, and you know he does feel distinctly different to Jango Fett, and that's all down to Tamira Morrison, and obviously you know the writing and the talented people that make it. But I think bringing him into the Star Wars universe and essentially giving you Boba Fett in a movie way more than you ever had him before should be commended. And also, my final point, and now I'm going to shut up. I think that's also interesting that you said that, in the sense that like, is it got the worst stuff in it? And the review that we were digging into from Honest Cinema Guy says, plus the usual focus on politics, doesn't say why he dislikes that or whether the politics are good or bad in the movie. Just says the usual focus on politics, which says to me that he doesn't like the idea of Star Wars being political. You know, it's always been political. You know, it was about, you know, World War II in space originally, and it was about authoritarianism and revolution. And
Return of the Jedi's Vietnam, isn't it?
Exactly, and the prequels are about, you know, as we said earlier, what George Lucas said, how democracy falls to a tyrant by the tyrant getting voted in and by them moving all the pieces so that the people look to this guy and think, yes, he's what we need to lead us. This is what we should do. We need a clone army to fight against the dirty separatists. We need the Jedi to be extinguished. They're not popular. We need to be an empire. We need to be, you know, strengthened, and only Palpatine can do it. That's exactly what he sells to the galaxy. It's all lies. And he manages to destroy everything. And, like, if that's not an interesting use of politics in a space opera, I don't know what is. And I also really, really like the idea that he butters up Jar Jar Binks, who was a hero in Phantom Menace, into approving all the emergency powers. And he does that so that the clone army can get instated and get created and can be used by the Republic, and he does it when Padme's not there, because Padme probably would have opposed it. She says it earlier on in the movie, she's trying to oppose the Military Creation Act. She says that to Anakin. So that's all like really well done. Bravo, Palpatine. You've moved all the pieces on the board so that you can make Jar Jar feel like a hero when actually he's screwing up the galaxy for years to come.
Yeah, for a long time.
Weird. That's why
Fantastic.
Padme is being assassinated at the beginning of the film, is because she opposes the army.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
So for her to get taken off the board and for her to want to stay there, but for Palpatine and the Jedi to make out like, you know, or Palpatine to make out to the Jedi, no, she needs to be off-world. We need to protect her. You know, he's the one that's hired the assassins. So that all comes together really nicely. And, you know, it is all tied to the politics of the movie.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I don't see how you can just say the usual focus on politics as if it's some bad thing. Like, I think, you know, obviously the Trade Federation disputes and the discussions aren't that thrilling in Phantom Menace, but again, that comes down to the dialogue. It's always the core problem of these movies is the dialogue and the execution of the actual scenes. It's not actually the ideas behind them. I think George Lucas actually had a really good stream of ideas for all these movies and how they would fit together amongst the original trilogy.
100%. I couldn't agree with that more. Definitely. And I think that to go back to what you said about the whole Django thing, I think that whole idea of the clone army has, you know, tainted all of the stuff with Django. I think people, because like when I'm watching this movie, it's some of my favorite stuff. All the stuff with Django Fett, pretty much. I mean, you get some of the best scenes. You get the chase with Obi-Wan. You get the big bit at the end with where Mace Windu and him stand off.
Mace Windu versus Django Fett is good.
Yeah, you get the whole bit on Kamino, which is just like amazing. Like, it's just brilliant. Like you're getting to see these, you know, the Mandalorian in full force. And I just think it's interesting that, you know, watching it now with that perspective of like, oh, people didn't really talk about or praise Django too much back then. But it's weird because, like you said, Matt, it's like you got the Boba Fett stuff you always wanted, but it's his dad. If anything, that's like I don't know. And you get to see young
The
Boba
only
Fett.
difference is he's got like a palette swap how Mario would have to Luigi.
Yeah,
but that makes sense, right? Because it's the armor when it's in better condition, when it's seen better days. So all of that makes sense to me. And like, you can tell that they went out of their way to make Jango Fett awesome. Like, he kills a Jedi with like one pistol, and he like falls off down the side. Like, he takes on Mace Windu with the flamethrower. He has a fight with Mace Windu. Obviously, he ultimately loses, but Mace Windu is one of the most powerful Jedi, so that makes sense. He
shoots that big rhino guy, jumps and rolls out the way, doesn't he? In one shot, boom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
And then like father, like son, he gets his jetpack fucked up and then gets killed.
Yeah. It rhymes.
But I really like Jango Fett, and I think I remember at the time seeing stuff like, oh, it diminishes Boba's mystique in the original trilogy that he's a clone and all of this stuff. But it's like, well, everyone likes all the Legends continuity that expanded upon Boba Fett anyway. Everyone has a taste for Boba Fett. Eventually that mystique is going to have to go away if we want to learn about him more as a character. In the same way that everyone's hyped for the Book of Boba Fett coming at the end of the year, which is going to do the exact same thing. I don't see why people were so annoyed that Jango got revealed as being his clone father. And just because Boba is a clone doesn't mean that he's not going to be an interesting character. It doesn't diminish him as a person just because he's literally a clone. He's still his own character. And, and that's something we've seen in the Clone Wars TV show as well. Like, all of those clones are also Boba Fett's, Tamira Morrison's, aren't they?
Like
They
nature
all
and
got
nurture, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're nurtured differently because they are born out of war, and obviously Boba Fett is born out of his experiences. So, even though Tamira Morrison has the face for all these characters, they are distinctly different. And I think it's a really interesting way to do it.
So do I now. In perspective, I've
Yeah.
grown to like. Think it's interesting. Like, enjoy it. I think the way they've taken it with the clones and the angle they've gone with it. I think there's has made me forgive that at the time when I was like, what? Like, what? So
Would
you
you
mean
think
all
that
the
was weird
stormtroopers? When I was younger, I remember being like, what? So you mean all the stormtroopers in A New Hope are Tamira Morrison? Like, that's what confused me as a kid. But then, now growing up and seeing, obviously, that's been sort of debunked. I like that stuff, sort of thing.
I do think that was at one point considered a bit like of a continuity error in the sense of like, well, how come they end up being like regular people by the time we get to like the Age of the Empire? But I think what it is it's like Palpatine uses the clones to create an army for the Republic very quickly, because obviously it's very hard for him to create an army from scratch, and the Republic are very opposed to it, very peaceful. So he uses Kamino and the clones as like a quick fire way to create an army, and then when they later become approved by the public, and the public find the clone army popular and they want an empire to be created, that's when he can then step in and go, okay, having all of our army grown on one planet on Kamino is not very good strategically. Whereas what we could do is we could pull a load of people from all our pro-Empire worlds and indoctrinate them and train them up to be soldiers, and then we'll have a far more loyal workforce, which is how he goes from having a clone army to an empire. So I think that actually fits in all really nicely.
I think in part it's that, and also, if I'm not mistaken, it might be in the Clone Wars animated TV show that you guys are watching, that the Kamino the people of Kamino say that the clone DNA is being degraded with every batch that they use. So, and then that, like, they started making Jango clones 10 years before Attack of the Clones. So that means that by the time we get to A New Hope, like, that DNA is fucking scrambled. So I think it's a mixture of you can't make good clones with this DNA anymore. You're just going to get a load of 99s.
Yeah.
And like what you said, it's more politically conscious and smarter to have your people be your army.
Yes. And also he's taking the iconography of the heroic clones who defended the Republic with the Jedi and their white armor, and he's taking that iconography and sticking different people inside for his empire. So it's like you're seeing that as a civilian in the Republic sector and going, oh, this is still the clones that saved us, right? This is still like that army that did all those good things. So even though it's been, it's very clever actually to scoop out the inside of the oyster and put your own thing back in there that you can control and what you wanted.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Which is probably one of the few great things that the sequel trilogy gave us, because if it wasn't for Finn, we wouldn't know that they weren't all clones anymore. Oh no, I lost him.
I'm sorry, I had to do it.
I had to do it to him.
Had to say it.
Amazing. Luke, do you want to go to the next review?
No. We've been talking
Too
for
long?
quite a long time. Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up, maybe.
We can
Well, can I-
squeeze one more in for luck, maybe?
God, might as well. One more.
Okay, one more. So this is a half star from Thomas. To be honest, what is there that hasn't already been said? This movie just fails at so many levels of filmmaking. It's not fun to watch, especially any scene with Anakin and Padme. The dialogue is terrible. The effects are pretty bad, and it's incredibly boring. It also has the worst lightsaber fight in the entire series at the end.
Wrong.
Many people... Oh, what's worse? Go on, what's worse? Say now.
All of the awful awful fights in Rise of Skywalker. All of them are, the fights where they're fighting between, like the Force Skype chat where Rey's on Kylo's ship and he's on Kimji, could be good, and there's some good choreography, but it's ultimately very slow, and it's ham-fisted by constantly, every time they come to blows, so you know that you're connected to Palpatine, right, and all this. So that, absolutely kills that fight. And then the
it does rhyme in the sense, that movie, with Attack of the Clones, in the sense that the dialogue is very similar in terms of how on the nose it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then so we get the absolute character assassination of Rey being tied to like an important bloodline, and not only is that classist and against the core values of what Star Wars fucking stands for, we then get treated to this terrible Death Star 2 fight. We're on the Death Star 2, so obviously J.J. Abrams thinks, well, I've given you a reference, so that's my work done. I don't have to bother to work anything interesting into this scene. So they're fighting on top of the Death Star. There's very little music. We were promised Duel of the Fates in the trailers. That doesn't happen here, and it's just frustrating. It's like you took the choreography and the action and the environments of the fights in the prequels to a whole nother level. The Duel of the Fates fight with Darth Maul and the Mustafar fight in the end of Episode 3 are fantastic. They build on what Lucas did in the original trilogy, except that he wanted to make the Jedi faster and appear more powerful. Once you've taken it to that level, you can't go back to the stage combat era, and that's kind of what they did with the sequel trilogy. The fights are slower, they're not as well choreographed. They don't make use of the environments.
Yeah, but with that, it's because with that comparison, it's the prequels when they're training and they're top of the game, and then it's the after the original trilogy, with the original trilogy being that very standing very still and hitting each other. So
I do think
they've got to
that's
restart the training.
That's the in-universe reason, but I think as films that should be made that should expand and better themselves from what came before, they should have gone, okay, so what we want to do is we want to keep making these lightsaber fights better and better and better. They should have been the best lightsaber fights of the entire series should have been in the sequels. They should have been absolutely epic.
Yeah.
And I think, just to talk about that, I think that what JJ tried to do, and I feel like what Rian Johnson got more when it comes to his lightsaber fight, is the blending of the two. He kind of blended a bit of the prequels where you got your fast action, they're doing the spinning and stuff, with a bit more of that, where the lightsaber just had a little bit more weight to it. And I think the Last Jedi. I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily like that scene, but I think that's the best lightsaber stuff we got in the entire sequel trilogy.
Which scene?
The Snoke being killed with Kylo Ren and
the throne room fight scene.
Rey. The throne room fight scene. I like that was a good blend, but like you said, we never really got that lightsaber on lightsaber fight for it to compare it to that. So it's hard
I like
to say.
the Last Jedi lightsaber fight. I like the throne room fight, and I like the confrontation with Kylo and Luke at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I think from a story perspective, they're really interesting. I like that obviously Kylo Ren betrays Snoke and kills him, and then you think they're teaming up and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really nice. And also, what I was saying earlier about the environments not being used very well in the J.J. Abrams movies, in Rian Johnson's movie, I think that's used a lot better. Like, Crate plays into the fight. The fact that you can see that Kylo is rubbing off the white layer of the ground, whereas Luke isn't. Very nice. And then the main throne room in Last Jedi, it's all red, isn't it? And then what they wanted to happen was, as the battle goes on, the fire peels away the red, as if to say that Snoke's power is diminishing, and also the might of the First Order is so performative and wafer thin. And I think that's really interesting.
Definitely.
So those fights, they've got some good stuff to them. Sorry,
But guys,
yeah.
If lightsabers don't hit each other, then it's not Star Wars.
Yeah, that is what people say. I do want to go back to quickly just segue away. I do want to go make a point on when he said about the filmmaking in Attack of the Clones, because it's something that I'm of two minds with. Because on the one hand, you have this great, innovative part in film history where, you know, this whole film shot in digital cameras. The majority of the backgrounds are made with CGI. There's a lot of CGI, and you got to think, I mean, people saying the CGI is not very good, but you look at that for the time, it's better than some of the CGI that we get today in some stuff. Obviously there's, you know, there's questionable aspects of it. But where I'm of two minds is, you know, because of that reason, George couldn't do much with the camera. The problem with Attack of the Clones and a lot with the prequels in general anyway, is because he has to keep the shot very still at a very medium angle, because, you know, he's dealing with the green screen elements, the lighting, everything's got to fit in post. So I can understand someone saying, you know, the filmmaking could have done more to express a lot of the feelings of the characters, or, you know, tell the story. But I think that what he does do with what he has, it's a difficult. I find. Do you know what I'm trying to say about that? Like, I find it very difficult to.
I think it's dated poorly, but when you look at what he was trying to do and the ambition and the scope of this movie, and also I think even though some of the CGI looks a little wonky, and obviously it is adjusting to, you know, I think it is the first film that was shot entirely on digital. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think so.
Well, I don't know if Danny Boyle made. I don't know.
It's
I
one
know
of
for
the
a
first,
fact
isn't
one of the first. Yes, definitely one of the first. Yeah.
If you actually look at like the art design and the design for the creatures and the worlds and the sets, they look incredible. You know, you get like Coruscant at nighttime looking like Blade Runner, and then at the start of the movie when Padme's flying on the clouds, it looks like Bespin. You get, you know, Camino, which again kind of mirrors Bespin in the sense that it's, you know, design-wise it looks very similar, except it's like obviously to do with the sea. It's like the water elements with the air, and then like Geonosis and the pit arena is fantastic, and also some of the shots with the arena. It's a practical arena. There's a really good video on YouTube that talks about some of the surprising practical effects of the prequels. And even though it's kind of known for being something that's a lot of green screen, I do think George Lucas did do more practical stuff than perhaps people give him credit for. But yeah, I think it comes together to create kind of, it's a weird tapestry of effects. And even today when I was watching it for the podcast, there's a moment where they're green screen running in Coruscant to get Zam Wesell as they go into the bar, and it looked terrible. And that stuff does really take away from it, unfortunately. But at the same time, you know, I think about all the designs of the ships and the characters and the clone troopers,
which you couldn't have done.
Which you couldn't have done. Yeah.
You couldn't have done without doing that. That's the fundamental cut of Achilles' heel of this trilogy, is that, you know, he was too ambitious for the time he was making them. Almost, you know, if he'd have made them a decade later, he wouldn't have necessarily had these problems. But then but then him doing this is what allowed a decade later to evolve. So it's kind of.
I think it's interesting
it's
that you said
catch-22.
he maybe should have waited a decade later, because I recently watched an interview with James Cameron, who said that he felt the prequels had far more imagination and breadth to them than the sequels. And not only do I think that's correct, but I also think it's interesting that George Lucas kind of jumped the gun on his effects, whereas James Cameron did wait a decade. He did wait for the effects to catch up so that he could do Avatar. And maybe if George Lucas had maybe had that foresight, who knows what the final look had been. But as you say, George Lucas almost stumbled so that all these other filmmakers could run.
Exactly, 100%.
And also, it's interesting that the new effects with The Mandalorian, where they do that sort of like photography around, I can't remember the exact name for it, but the photography around the sets so they can actually get them filmed much faster. That all started with George Lucas, I believe. Like, he was trying to get that technology to work, but he couldn't quite crack it.
Yeah, he had the idea for it initially, which I thought was amazing. He had that idea like back then, and it only been formed now. Like, and I just think, you know, with all his flaws, the man is an innovator, and I think that the movie, like I said, you know, it has its problems with the way it deals with these filmmaking and the CGI. But I watched a video on Corridor Crew recently where they discussed the prequels, and they said that the effects of Jar Jar and some of the CGI is like groundbreaking. Like, he said that is incredible. Like, and they're guys that do this. You know, they're saying that is amazing. That for that time with what he had, that they could do that. So it, you know, it's like you said, you know, obviously it birthed CGI, which people are of two minds of, where, you know, it's overused nowadays. But then we also get the perfect blends where, you know, directors are, like our favourite directors now are using these tools. Like Finch is using them all the time, and you can't even tell. But, you know, if it wasn't for these guys taking that leap, if it wasn't for George doing what he did, we wouldn't have had. It's a very interesting conversation, I feel like.
Yeah.
About
Yeah,
these
and
movies.
also I feel like it's easy to dunk on the look of the prequels and dunk on the stuff that doesn't look great.
Yeah.
It's far harder to say that actually from a design perspective there's some really, really interesting stuff in it. And I do think it actually also slots in really well in terms of like this is the era before the original trilogy, and the Clone Troopers. There's such a great marriage between the design of the Mandalorian from Joe Johnston originally back in the Boba Fett days to what we get with the Stormtroopers created for New Hope. Like it's gone back round, isn't it? It's like from the chronological perspective, you go Jango Fett Mandalorian helmet to this Clone Trooper helmet, and then eventually they mould a little bit more in Episode 3, and then they continue to evolve until we get the Stormtroopers. Even onto the sequels, they continue that, don't they? And they keep like changing them slightly and modifying them, and it's really nice to line them all up once it's all said and done. I think that's again a design feat.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that goes along with what we were saying. Like, yeah, maybe he couldn't use the camera the way he might have wanted to. I mean, I know George is very coverage based anyway. There was this whole argument I think I read before about how he wasn't very happy with Empire, with the way Irvin Kershner was sort of directing it because of he was using more camera movement, more elaborate lighting, and when it comes to Return, the reason why that kind of looks more flat is because George kind of wanted it to look more coverage based. So there's obviously that argument as well. But I think that he uses the other elements of filmmaking, which are, like you say, production design and costumes, to tell a story in another deeper way, in a way that it's telling its own story. And I know obviously that's what it's there for anyway, but like you said, it's amazing there isn't more plot holes and flaws in these movies when you're thinking about the amount that they're dealing with, like even just little details of like the Star Destroyers. We're seeing what the original Star Destroyers look like, and we notice them with we associate them with Hope, whereas later on they're like the scariest ships we can see. And I think that just all of that idea of seeing everything before and the designs and everything that's thought through. And I know that people are not a fan of those designs at the time and didn't feel like it felt Star Wars. I think now with us growing up, it feels the most Star Wars almost now.
It's one to one. It's one to one.
Yeah.
And also like going back and watching them today and seeing what I think James Cameron says, which I agree with, is that there is more imagination. There are more interesting planets. There are more weird things and crazier worlds that we explore in the prequels that expand on the original trilogy. To go back and watch the sequels, and particularly like Force Awakens, where it's so one to one with the original trilogy, it's so far up its arse, it's ridiculous. And stuff like Jakku just looking exactly beat for beat like Tatooine is so boring. And even though Force Awakens is shot way better than Attack of the Clones, there's far better filmmaking techniques deployed, but it's just it's a clone of A New Hope, which is what everyone seems to have a problem with in Attack of the Clones.
Yes. It's just
clones.
Yeah, 100%. It's just it's crazy. I think that he had this idea, and for all its flaws of the prequels and for its flaws of Attack of the Clones in general, he tried to tell something completely original and new that we hadn't seen before. And the man tried. That is it. Like, is this movie awful? Maybe to some people, but like, this is the guy that tried to tell this.
Is it my favorite film?
Yeah.
Yes. Is your favorite film awful? Yes. Sorry.
But I don't think you can take away the merit from this movie, and I can't say that I don't. It's not a little guilty pleasure of mine within the Star Wars universe, the canon. I think that.
Charlie, I feel you've jumped the gun and given us our review before I finish this review. Hold back, Charlie.
Damn.
I haven't finished this review. Stop
right.
giving your
Too
review.
excited.
He's actually
Back to
shouting so
Thomas.
loud that I couldn't hear him.
Yeah, same.
Cut out.
So, amazing.
Many people will say that the Clone Wars TV show makes this movie better. I would disagree because it doesn't change any of the main problems with the movie. It just makes some things more understandable and gives more context to the events. If you want to watch it, go ahead, but temper your expectations accordingly.
I do think that is a rather astute point in the sense that I don't like it when people say, "Oh, but this thing happened in this spin-off media, so therefore it makes the movie better." It's like, you shouldn't have to do homework on any piece of media.
I agree.
With a corresponding piece of media to get it. A really good example I would cite is for the Doctor Who 50th anniversary special, there's a short film that played a week before that starred a previous Doctor. That it was kind of like a big twist reveal that he'd been shown in it, right? And Paul McGann's Eighth Doctor gets given the choice to regenerate into a warrior to help the Time War, and the Sisterhood of Khan, who are like these. They're kind of connected to Gallifrey, but they're essentially like they've got elevated Time Lord science. They can actually give you warrior traits in the regeneration, and they give him a choice of these different cups so that he can pick what sort of regeneration he wants, and then afterwards he becomes the War Doctor, right? There is no hint, not a single scrap of detail in this entire short film that the chalices have placebos in them. There's no hint to that at all. And then Stephen Moffat, a few years later, when he did the novelisation for Day of the Doctor, he revealed that the chalice actually had lemonade in it, and that, you know, obviously to become the War Doctor, it was always inside him. And it's like, yes, that's an interesting point, right? And I do agree that, you know, as much as the Sisterhood of Khan could alter his regeneration, the things that made him the War Doctor are still within, right? That all makes sense, right? But not only do you already get that in the Day of the Doctor 50th anniversary special, there's no hint towards that in the short film, meaning that saying it's lemonade and then commenting to me when I don't mention that it's lemonade, saying, "Oh, well, actually, you should know it's lemonade," is bullshit to me. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, you can't just add in something else after the fact as a retcon and then say that it was always there in the text, because it's not.
Yes,
In Night of the
I
Doctor, there's no allusion to that whatsoever. So in my mind, when I watch Night of the Doctor, that doesn't happen. That is not canon, and that's how it should be. You know, like what is in the frame is what matters.
Yeah. Well, to go off that point, but to make it Star Wars, the ninth film that shall not be named, it's that whole the lady stormtrooper, the Finn swap, that lady turns out to be the daughter of
Lando.
Lando?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Yes,
Lando's daughter. But in the film, it's just two people with some chemistry. But in the book, that's father-daughter. And it's like, why didn't you say any of this?
That's
why
not canon.
wasn't... Yeah.
And like, I don't mind Lando having a daughter, but don't do it as like a twist you don't reveal in a movie that's already got far too many things going on with a character that you introduce that you immediately sideline. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Make
It's so-
Lando's
it's
daughter
so
Rise
messy.
of Skullkid has none of the excuses that George Lucas has for this movie.
Yeah, but I think that feeds into J.J. Abrams' mystery boxes. He likes having all these little things, but when you have all those little things in the last film of the series, you don't have a chance to answer any of those things, so you have to release a book.
Well, J.J. Abrams, he can't do answers and he can't do endings. So, like, he's very good at starting things off. And I think, you know, the first Star Trek movie and, you know, the rejuvenation that Mission Impossible 3 gave to that franchise, and the first Force Awakens, which is still a fun movie, if in retrospect.
I like
you know,
Super 8 as well.
Yeah, Super 8's good, yeah.
Super
But
8's
like,
good.
well, that's kind of a one and done. I mean, in the sense that, like, he can start off
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
long storied franchises very well.
Yeah.
But he can't close them. He has no idea how to close them. It's a shame.
To go back to Thomas's point, though, I feel the stuff in the Clone Wars with Obi-Wan and Satine, I think that does feed in nicely to the films, because he's had this relationship and this love, and that's why he doesn't like forcibly stop Anakin and Padme.
No, don't get me wrong. I think it's all nice to add all that stuff in. I do think the Clone Wars definitely adds a lot of context that is very interesting for not only the prequels but the entire Star Wars saga. But that stuff should never be the excuse. It should never be, oh, you didn't watch this thing. Well, that's why this thing didn't make sense to you. Actually, it's like it should always be
Definitely.
each thing
bullshit.
makes sense itself, and they come together to make themselves stronger, like the Avengers. And us.
Exactly.
You didn't
And
have
if you
that.
wanted to...
You didn't have that excuse back in the day. You know, we have that excuse now because, you know, we have so much different media and content. Back in the day, you watched a movie, that was the movie. You didn't go back and read a digital comic online that tells you the rest. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't think you can.
I mean,
Do
I
that.
think from the birth of movies, there's always been those people that make novelizations off of like the original scripts and everything.
Yeah, but it's not
So I feel
necessity
like-
to watch the movie. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
No.
it is for Rise of Skywalker, for example.
Yes, definitely. And hey, if the listeners wanted to hear more about the Clone Wars TV show, guess where you can go? You can go to Full Fat Podcast, where they're
Thank you, Luke.
going
Thank you
through
very
it week
much.
for week. No worries. A nice little plug there.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Now it's time.
You can catch that wherever you get your podcasts.
Exactly.
And on the Full Fat Podcast YouTube channel, of which there'll be a
Exactly.
link in the description of this full-length video on YouTube.
Oh,
Nice.
okay. I wasn't aware.
Right.
Right.
Got me in my
After-
fingers all in all the podcasts. I got-
in all pies. Right, you guys have not hidden your agendas at all. Matt, of course, that's not your job. You've come in with this as one of your favourite films. Charlie, I expect better from you. However, now is the time where you can tell us how you truly feel about this film. Matt, would you like to go first on giving your review of Attack of the Clones?
Oh, there was a great segue there. I didn't think you were going to ask me. I was going to do the Poe Dameron. Who talks first? You talk first. It was going to be hilarious. It was going to be hilarious.
But then it would have been, then we'd have to acknowledge the sequel trilogy, and you're not about that life.
Good. I acknowledge the sequel trilogy, and there's parts of it I like, and that's all we'll have to say about that for now. But yeah, Attack of the Clones. It's not my favourite film, unfortunately. It's not my favourite Star Wars film, but it is a film that is close to my heart. It's one of those films that when I was a kid made me want to go on and explore more films as I come into being a man, and it's important to me in that respect. But I think also, you know, I can take my nostalgia hat off and watch it as a movie today and say, you know, there's a lot of things that don't work. It's ultimately a clunky movie. I can see why people hate it. I can see why you hated it back in 2002. But what I will say is, you know, maybe go and watch it again, because I think there's some really well thought out set pieces. I think the actual story it's trying to tell is very well structured, and as part of the prequel trilogy, I think the fall of Vader and the rise of Palpatine and you know, the defamation of the Jedi is a story that is worth telling, and this tells an essential part in that chapter. And yeah, I think it's a fun time. I'm always up for watching it with Mr. Charlie Lilly, and you know, when we can eventually, Mr. Harry Bagg. And Luke, if you'd like to now join us on our Star Wars marathons, you can too, because we always have a
I
great bit
fully
of
thought you were just not going to invite me then.
fun. That would have been great, wouldn't it?
That would be so-
Just been like,
After lockdown, Char, do you want to come watch Star Wars? We'll invite Harry, and
Luke, I wouldn't if I was you.
that's it.
I think that's it.
Charlie, your turn. The spotlight's on you.
Yeah, so, I mean, look. This was my least favourite Star Wars movie as a kid. It isn't now because we've had new movies. I have my problems with it, as everyone does. Everyone knows the problems I have with it, essentially. But watching it almost as an adult now, I see its merit, and I think there's some really fun scenes. I think, you know, it gives you the filth you want. You know, you get a cool little lightsaber back. You get to see Yoda. I mean, also, like, you got to think about the way that Yoda's built up as well. You know, the way he pulls his lightsaber out. No one had ever seen that before. And I lost my mind as a kid. So it understands moments. It understands how to grab my attention. It gives me enough action beats for me to be engaged. It does address and come up with some new ideas that make me see the original movies in a different light, for better and worse. Like, you know, like I said earlier, like, is it an awful movie? Like, maybe. But I do think it has merit to it, and I think it has some enjoyable elements, and I can't say I can't have fun. I don't have fun with it at times. I think Matt pretty much hit the nail on the head with his little review on how I feel as well. But yeah, that's probably all I can say about the Attack of the Clones. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I feel like throughout this video you've said a lot of things that I agree with. It's the top and tail of this film are great. The middle has some moments, but it's all about the memes, and the memes are great for this film. This film and this Revenge of the Sith, mwah, beautiful. Who'd have thought that this many years later, it would still be in the in the zeitgeist.
Pop guy.
Pop guy in the zeitgeist because of all this terrible dialogue.
It's
and
me. I'm
all
Luke.
these
I'm the pop
weird
culture guy.
Pop culture guy. I'm here. Fuck. Fully missed. But yeah, some of it's weird. Some of the dialogue's a bit odd. The romance between Anakin and Padme is very strangely dealt with. But hey, when they're going into the pit and they finally confess their love for each other, it was all worth it in the end. It's great.
With John Williams' fantastic Love Across the Stars score.
Wow.
The music in these movies is the one thing no one can take anything away from.
100%.
It's all fantastic.
John Williams never misses a beat, man.
No,
He does not.
He doesn't.
But yeah, okay. Matt, where can people find you if they wanted to?
If you want to find me, you can go to the Full Fat Videos YouTube channel, where I have a variety of video essays on lots of different pop culture topics, including Star Wars, Marvel, and Doctor Who. You can also find me on the Full Fat Podcast with my friend here, Charlie Lee, and we discuss Clone Wars week to week and the latest WandaVisions with our other good partner, Terry Merkin. And the three of us, after that, when WandaVision ends, we'll be covering Falcon Winter Soldier, so you might want to get on that. It's going to be a bit of a party. Back to you.
Back to the studio.
What I love
get me
there
on socials. You can get me on socials.
And socials. You're on all the socials.
Yeah. Where,
what I love there is that you pointed to where Charlie is on your screen, but there's nothing to say that's where Charlie will be when in the actual video.
You know what? Just do a couple of takes of me going like in different places.
We'll just cut it in.
Yeah, we'll just cut it in.
Your mouth won't be
Whichever
saying
one
the same
works.
thing though.
We'll do a Han Solo like special edition tilt.
But just your arm.
Matt
And
pointed
Charlie, where
first.
can people find us?
Me? You want me to do this?
Yeah, you.
Okay. Well, they can find us on YouTube. Your favourite film is awful, where we have these video essays that you are watching video podcasts which you are watching right now. You can find us on Instagram, Your Favourite Film Is Awful, and Facebook, Your Favourite Film Is Awful, as well as Twitter at FavFilmIsAwful, FAV Film Is Awful. So yeah, send us, please comment, subscribe, do all that jazz. I found out that 50% of the people watching the videos are not even subscribed. I've seen this on the statistics. I see you guys out there, so please just click that button. Just click that little button. There's a little subscribe button. It doesn't hurt. You know?
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
You're here. If you got this far, you might as well subscribe. You know.
You might as well, you know. If we gave you at least one giggle, you got to subscribe. That's the rule.
One
little
giggle
giggle
equals one prayer.
Yeah. Or even if I just made you go like this, like if
just
we made you
getting
do that, you got to
desperate now.
subscribe. Yeah, I am.
Just basically begging
Yeah.
for subscription.
Calm it.
Please.
Comment. And don't forget, there is some people that will only be listening to this on the actual podcast
They
and
won't.
won't see this lovely display that you've done.
They
Oh,
won't, but
that's
the
true,
ones
that's
that
true.
do, they get the exclusive content because they subscribe to YouTube, you know.
Yeah,
so
the cool kids.
Exactly.
The cool kids.
Exactly.
Right, let's wrap this
Much
up
like
before
us,
we
the
can.
cool kids.
Right, we're done. It's over. The end. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for watching and
Bye.
listening.
Take care. See you later.
Bye-bye.
What's your favorite?
God, that's awful.
Favorite?
Awful.
Awful.